Namaskar children, I am Vandana and I will be taking your science classes from now onwards. You have already started with chapter 8, Cell, Structure and Functions. We will be continuing with that topic. In this chapter, we will be defining what is a cell, why do we call it the structural and functional unit of life. We will mention about its discovery and how do we study cells. Also, as we proceed with the chapter, we will discuss the different shapes and sizes of cells and how are they related to their respective functions. So we define cell as the smallest structural and functional unit of life. Why do we call it the structural unit of life is as it forms the structure or body of living organisms. And we call it the functional unit of life as it performs all the functions in living organisms, which includes digestion, respiration, reproduction, excretion, etc. All these basic functions in a living organisms are performed by cell. So we call it the functional unit of life also. Cell was discovered in 1665 by Robert Hooke. He was observing the slices of cork from the bark of a tree under a simple magnifying glass. He noticed small compartments which were separated by walls. He named those compartments as cells. This is the structure of cells as observed by Robert Hooke, the famous honeycomb structure. The study of cell and various structures present in it is called cell biology or cytology. Cell can be studied using microscope. Cells are stained with different stains to study its parts clearly. Some of the commonly used stains in the laboratory are iodine, methylene blue, and safranin. I'll show you the image of the human cheek cells which have been stained and also the image of onion peen cells which are stained. Let us now try to understand the basic structure of a cell. A cell contains three basic parts. First is the outermost boundary of the cell, which is also known as the cell membrane. It forms the outer boundary of the cell. Next is a liquid containing cell organelles inside the cell. So there is a liquid inside the cell which contains the cell organelles. Cell organelles would refer to the main components, main organs of inside the cell. And this liquid is referred to as cytoplasm. And the third and the most important part inside the cell is the control center of the cell, that is the nucleus of the cell. We will be discussing all these parts in brief detail. For now, you need to remember that these are the three basic components of a cell. The outermost boundary, that is the cell membrane, the liquid inside the cell which contains the cell organelles, cytoplasm, and the control center of the cell, the nucleus. So this is what we just discussed. The three basic parts of a cell. Firstly, cell membrane, which forms the outermost boundary of the cell. Secondly, cytoplasm, which is the liquid content inside the cell and it contains the cell organelles. And third and the most important one, the nucleus, which is the control center of the cells that controls all the functions of the cell. So students, now we are aware of the basic structure of a cell. The number of cells in an organism may vary. There are organisms which contain only one cell in their body. They are also known as unicellular organisms. On the other hand, there are organisms which contain more than one cell in their body. They are known as multicellular organisms. We are going to differentiate between these two types now. So let us tabulate the difference between unicellular and multicellular organisms. Unicellular organisms, as the name is indicating, their body is made up of a single cell, whereas multicellular organisms are made up of more than one cell. Secondly, in unicellular organisms, one cell performs all the functions, whereas in multicellular organisms, different cells are grouped together to perform different functions. Third point of difference is that unicellular organisms are comparatively smaller and simpler to understand. That is, their structure is simple, as they are made up of only one cell, whereas multicellular organisms are comparatively larger and complex. Examples of unicellular organisms are amoeba, paramecium, bacteria, yeast, etc. And examples for multicellular organisms are human, cow, rat, tree, etc. Here we have now drawn one of the unicellular organisms which we are already introduced to since class 7th. This is amoeba. We have labeled the main components of this unicellular organism. The cell membrane, which forms the outermost boundary, cytoplasm, which contains the cell organelles, food vacuole that helps in digestion of food, and pseudopodia, which is also known as the false feet, which helps amoeba in locomotion and capturing food. This is how it looks like when viewed under a microscope. This is paramecium when viewed under a microscope.